The parable of the Mexican fisherman. So, yeah, sit back for a little story time. This is about a minute long, and I will kind of try to read it fast. But I do think, like, for the listeners, the first time I heard this, the first time most of us heard this, it was profound.
It's an incredible story.
So, the Mexican Fisherman and the Investment Banker, author unknown. An American investment banker was at the pier of a small coastal Mexican village. This is so weird to read a story. At the small coastal Mexican village when a small boat with just one fisherman docked. Inside the small boat were several large yellowfin tuna. The American complimented the Mexican on the quality of his fish and asked how long it took to catch them. The Mexican replied, "Only a little while." The American then asked why he didn't stay out longer and catch more fish. The Mexican said he had enough to support his family's immediate needs. The American then asked, "But what do you do with the rest of your time?" The fisherman said, "I sleep late, fish a little, play with my children, take siestas with my wife Maria, and stroll into the village each evening where I sip wine, play the guitar with my amigos. I have a full and busy life." The American scoffed. "I have an MBA from Harvard and can help you," he said. "You should spend more time fishing, and with the proceeds, buy a bigger boat. With the proceeds from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats, and eventually you could have a fleet of fishing boats. Instead of selling your catch to middlemen, you could sell directly to the processor, eventually opening up your own cannery. You could control the product processing and distribution," he said. "Of course, you would need to leave this small coastal fishing village and move to Mexico City, then LA, and then New York City, where you will run your expanding enterprise." The Mexican fisherman asked, "But how long will this all take?" To which the American replied, 15 to 20 years or so." And the Mexican said, "But then what?" The American laughed and said, "That's the best part. When the time was right, you would announce an IPO and sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. You would make millions." The Mexican said, "Millions? Then what?" The American said, "Then you could retire. You could move to a small coastal fishing village where you could sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take siestas with your wife, and stroll to the village in the evenings where you could sip wine and play guitar with your amigos."
Yes, good read. That didn't take as long as I thought. That was beautiful.
All right.
I like stories.
That was a great story. Okay, so we talk about this all the time. We think about this in our daily lives. We talk about it every time we get together.
Do we dismiss it sometimes?
I think we do. I think we're all playing sort of this like Harvard MBA guy, and we're also playing the fisherman guy simultaneously. But where do we land? Where do we land on the idea? That's the key question. And it goes back to the original point is like, well, how much is enough?
Yeah.
And if it is enough, what would you be doing anyway?
Right. Nick had to throw that in because Nick wants to build businesses and that's it.
It's a good point, and I think each of us has a pretty different take on this. Like, this might be one where it's interesting. Like, I would like to hear what each of you guys, like, truly personally think, because there is the Mexican fisherman to me is a very individual, a preference story.
Like
your fishing and my fishing are very different things.
Yes, like what is your version of fishing and walking through town and playing music with your amigos.
And another part of it is like how honest we're being with ourselves about are we actually being the MBA guy when we could be the fisherman?
Well, I think Steven made a point early in our podcasting to say that like even if you had $10 billion, you would still be doing this podcast.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe not on the podcast. Maybe
I don't just do this for the millions a month.
For the 900 TikTok views.
Wow.
660. All right, let's tone it down.
All right, you go, Eric.
Man, I don't want to go first, but I do have a pretty clear idea of what my version of fishing is, and
you played Torrey Pines twice this week.
I played golf twice this week. These are weekdays in the afternoons, mid-afternoons. So I tend to think that I go fishing a lot. You know, my version of fishing, I live that life. But, I also think that, like, it takes a blend. Our friend Marcus, when we brought it up on one of our Wednesday meetings, he said, like, if you go too far on one path or the other, you're going to feel unfulfilled. So, like, even if you go, like, fishing all day, meaning, like, playing golf, Torrey Pines all day, like you're gonna feel a little bit of this itch to be like, "Wow, shit! I should be like utilizing my faculties a little more," you know. And you just can't go one way or the other. I think it has to be a blend.
One aspect that stands out for me, this isn't my full take on this or anything, but one thing that a problem I have with the Mexican fisherman parable. A human being that isn't experiencing a certain level of suffering and challenge in life goes into atrophy. And I don't think I could ever be a full-time fisherman, personally. I do think I could enjoy my life in terms of surrounding myself with more hobbies and filling that bucket more. But I think that would quickly become very unfulfilling, just like you said, because there's no challenge, there's no growth, there's no pursuit of more. So for me, my fishing is my life's mission. What I am aiming to do that I hold sacred inside of myself that gets me out of bed in the morning is my fishing. Sometimes it's building a business, sometimes it's doing this podcast, sometimes it's writing a book, but all of that is the fishing for me, because it's that's the purpose, that's the reason I exist. That's why I do what I do, and that to me is enough of a challenge and enough of a pursuit of Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot as well, right? I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson and his ideas around meaning, where he talks about pick up some responsibility and put some weight on your shoulders. That's what creates meaning in life, not sitting around doing nothing. So that is I think that the Mexican Fisherman is a minute and a half story that has some deeply profound meaning to it. But what it is missing for me is why? What are you really doing? Are you really supposed to sit around and just have this dream life? What's the more? What's your potential? Is this person living out his potential fully by just siestas and fishing? I don't think so. And I think what makes life meaningful is knowing that before you die, you tried and you really put it all out there, and you at least attempted to reach your potential. That's what it is for me.
I mean, Eric, I think you nailed it, because in the parable, the fisherman is still working a little bit every day. He's not grinding 12 hours a day, but he's still working every day. But the rest of his time is spent on his relationships with his wife and his friends, and maybe that's what will be more meaningful in the end. It's not like he's building something great, and all of us, I think Naval mentions this, all of our names within 4 generations you die. He says you die twice. You die once when you physically leave this earth, and you die the last time your name is ever mentioned, which for most people, no matter how famous you are, might be 4 generations from now, unless you're Alexander the Great, right? That will happen. So there is this kind of false goal of some massive legacy that exists in perpetuity. So what are we doing? And I think
which then is kind of a reason to not
well, I'm
do
also,
so much.
I'm also guessing that this fisherman, I don't know if he said it explicitly, but I'm guessing this fisherman also enjoys fishing. He even when he's doing it for a living, catching 4 yellowfin, he's probably having a good time doing that. And I think we all share that
totally
aspect. We do what we like to make money.
I was going to ask Steven, did he enjoy farming tokens right before he got here?
No.
Steven, are you okay?
Staring at charts in 2 a.m. in bed?
No.
But Steven, you have an interesting take on this, right? You've talked before about how this is a temporary time in your life where you're I have some goals and I want to meet those goals, and I also feel that the timing is perfect. I want to strike this opportunity.
Yeah, I feel like it's a weird situation for me. 16 years ago, I can't believe it was 16 years ago, Jesus Christ. But 16 years ago, when I had my only real quote unquote job as a trader at Bridgewater, I remember 6 months into the job, I hated my life. I hated my life. I was so depressed, and I didn't really understand why. I had this great job. I only worked 45 hours a week.
This is Ray Dalio's firm.
Just
some people may not make the connection between Bridgewater.
Yeah, I was making 150 grand a year, first year out of college.
Dude, we have the same story, like me and Google.
The office was in like the woods, surrounded by this stream and this peaceful area of Westport. It was like really like should have been like a dream for most people, and like, but like for me, I felt like miserable. Like it started to like when I would wake up and I was like, okay, here I go again. I gotta make some coffee and then get in my car and drive to work, and I'm gonna go back and I have to do this every day. I remember I took like a day off to play a poker tournament at Foxwoods, and I won it, and it was like,
As you do.
Nice.
But and the next day I played again, and I was playing like 1-2 no limit, you know, like $200 on the table. And I remember like thinking when I was playing that game, I was like, wow, I would just rather do this. And then I was like, wait a minute, that's like crazy. Like I would rather just play this 1-2 no limit game and I'd probably honestly kill myself if I did that for like a year, you know. But at the time I was just like so yearning to like not go back into the office. And then I kind of realized like at that point, like the most important thing for me was to like have freedom. And like for me, like my degree of freedom is like way larger than most people's need for freedom. And I made up my mind to quit. And I basically went to work and I told him he's going to leave in like a few weeks or whatever. And they were like,
Hey,
well,
listen up, Ray.
they were just like, well, you know, if you don't want to be here anymore, you can just leave now. And I was like, oh. And that was it. I left and I drove home.
2-week notices make no sense.
Yeah,
If
but like
you're
I
done,
remember
you're done.
driving home and I felt so good. I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. And you know, for the last like decade and a half, like I've basically had just complete freedom to do whatever I want. And so I feel like torn because I feel like I'm partly already like living the parable, but I'm like not entirely there yet. But to me that story resonates with me because that is everything. Like that man he's like kind of truly free in a way.
Yeah. Well said.
I don't know if I said anything of significance there, but
No, I think for me, the starting point, another great parable, or it's not even a parable, but like just a question or example. The starting point for me with Alan Watts was with one question. I was introduced to this one talk. You can listen to it. It's like 3 minutes long on YouTube. And from there, I haven't looked back. I don't even know how many hours of Alan I've consumed, but it started with one question. What would you do if money were no object? And it's such a simple question, but I bring this up to people and to myself all the time. It's like, it's my filter question. And if I can align my life with that question and that the truth, the answer that is true behind that question, then I think I'm being the Mexican fisherman. And so, like, there is life and there is paying bills and there are certain things that we just have to do. There's a lot of people hear this kind of stuff, by the way, just like actually address, like people say, well, guys, you know, Armand, like, you're not in my position. You don't have 3 kids. You don't have these bills, and I don't have what you have. I didn't meet the people you've met. I didn't have the job experience you've had to get to the point to make the money you have. To that I say, absolutely. Like, that's completely true. It's difficult to project and say like that your worldly issues are not real. They are real. They're real circumstances, but there still are ways to make small adjustments to find more joy. Basically, it's like a lot of people play this, and this is almost become politicized. By the way, this idea of this statement that I'm making right now, where it's like it's almost become this thing where, like, on the right, I don't know how I got into politics, but it's become that. So you almost have to address it. On the right, there's this issue with people saying, like, don't be a victim. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps. You can change your life. You have the authority, the autonomy, the agency to make yourself something in this country or whatever country you live in. And then it's become popular on the left to say, but no, I'm being held down by the system. I'm a victim. Both of those are true.